Welcome to Country Cow Designs, where we make bag patterns for bag makers. In this little video, I'm going to introduce to you our no-sew leather patterns. So at Country Cow Designs, we're probably more known for our sewn patterns, which my wife usually does. But you may know that myself, Adam, I really like working with leather. So a couple of years ago, I released this pattern, which is the no-sew tote. It rhymed, had a nice ring to it. It was a bit of an experiment just to introduce people to using leather, having a go, but specifically people who couldn't use a leather sewing machine, couldn't hand stitch. So the construction of these bags is entirely with rivets. So it enabled you to play around with a leather bag without some of the drawbacks of actually making it. So we released the no-sew tote a couple of years ago. It was way more successful than we realized, and people wanted me to do another one. So last year we released the no-sew crossbody, which is a satchel style bag, a crossbody bag with exactly the same construction, all made with rivets. And ever since we released these two, you guys have been asking for me to do another one. So I was trying to think of a different design, and the next one that came out was the no-sew clutch. It was not planned that they all fit in together, but a nice little mistake. Now, when you watch this video first, this will not be released. This comes out a few days after this video will be released. But I just want to explain some principles behind the bag patterns, what you need to know to make any of these bags, the leather choices, and some of the tools. So I'm going to talk you through the basics so you can perhaps have a go at making possibly your first leather bag, or at least having a go at what we've provided here. Now, first of all, the question that we always get asked regarding these patterns is, can I make it with cork, vinyl, or something that's not made with leather? Technically you can. I would not recommend it though. These bags have no lining, they have no stabilizers, so all the structure is purely in the leather you're using. And something like cork or vinyl is generally far too thin. Its raw edges deteriorate a lot quicker. So although I know some people have tried it with some reasonable success, my strong recommendation is this is a leather only pattern. And hopefully you'll give it a go with some leather options. So what I'll do, we'll show you some tips, how we make them, how you can choose your leather, and hopefully you can enjoy making one of these no-sew leather patterns. So with like all bags, the first thing to do is to print the pattern in order to make your bag. Now everything I'm going to discuss applies to all three no-sew patterns unless I specifically mention a certain detail. But we're going to use the no-sew clutch because that's our most recent pattern, which comes out very soon. So you want to print your pattern and assemble the pieces. Now, excuse the state of this one, but I've been using it, as you can imagine. But essentially, this is what it's going to look like. This is your pattern piece, just assembled from printing off the individual sheets, and you put it all together. Now, the best thing to have, if you were to make quite a few of these, would be acrylic templates. I've got those for the no-sew tote and the no-sew crossbody, and they really help to improve the accuracy. But of course, absolutely nothing wrong with this. I would just recommend perhaps printing it on a thick card paper or something like that to make it a bit easier. So you want to print your pattern pieces, make sure it's nice and accurate. That's going to make cutting the leather out really easily. And that will help you produce a nice clean design on all the parts you're making. Now, one of the nice things about this pattern design is that you can print it at various sizes. They're all scalable. So for example, here we have a slightly smaller version. So this has been printed at 80%. So just go on Adobe or whatever software you're printing, select 80% and then just print. And it comes out a bit smaller, and the result I think actually works out quite well, if you see here. So that's the standard size, and this is at 80%. The way you assemble it is exactly the same, but it just comes out a bit smaller. And now that does apply to all three patterns, the tote, the crossbody, and the clutch. But I think it works probably best with the clutch because you produce almost like a wallet size. So that's 80%, of course something like 90% would work. You could even go bigger, say 110%. So that's a nice thing you can play around with. So once you've printed your pattern and you've got it all assembled, obviously you're then looking to actually start cutting the leather. Now what leather are you going to use? Now every pattern includes some tips, instructions of what sort of weights of leather to use, what thickness, what types. So use that as a guide. Now this leather here is what we call Pueblo leather. It's a veg tan Italian leather. It's very nice to work with and it ages really nicely. Now this bag is about 2 months old and this is about 2 weeks old. Now you can see how leather changes colour. It tans in the sun just like our skin would do. Now every leather is going to behave slightly differently, but veg tan leather, which is usually more expensive leathers, that's what's going to age like this. It's going to mature, I guess you could say. Your chrome tan leathers, which we'll look at in a minute, won't tend to change because they're tanned through chemicals, so they tend to be a bit more stable as they get older. So this is veg tan. This is a 1.8 mil leather, which is about 4.5 ounces. This is perfect for the no-sew clutch and can also be used for the no-sew totes. So great options for using that. Now, a really nice option is also something like this. Now, this is also veg tan leather. Again, about 1.8 in thickness. The difference, though, is that this is what's called a museum leather. So it's almost kind of got sort of a marble effect. It's also slightly stiffer, but lighter at the same time. Hard to describe, really, but every leather has its own different properties and the way it works. But again, this works absolutely fine for the no-sew clutch. I've made one for a no-sew tote as well, and it's fine, although not quite as stiff because it's a slightly thinner leather, but a fantastic option nonetheless. Now, this is a lovely option for making these bags. This is a chrome tan leather. So it's chromed through chemicals, so it produces a lot faster, therefore makes it a bit cheaper. You get more variety of colours. This is a good quality chrome tan leather, actually called Country Cow leather. That's where we got our name from back in the day. Now, as you saw in the intro, I made all 3 bags using this leather. It's 2 mil thick, which is about 5 ounces. It's got a nice stiffness to it. This is perfect for all 3 bags, including the no-sew crossbody, which generally needs a slightly heavier leather because of the flap design. It wouldn't really work with something as light as a 1.8 or 4.5 ounces. So this is perfect for all 3 bags, hence why I made all 3 bags from this colour leather. And actually this purple is a really nice colour, and I think my sister has already nabbed 1 or 2 of these bags because purple is her favourite colour, which is always a good sign when somebody wants what you make. Now this is also a lovely option, again for all 3 no-sew patterns. This is a 2 mil 5 ounce veg tan leather. Very traditional, quite thick, quite heavy, but really, really sturdy. And this is going to age beautifully as it gets older and gets used. So that's a really nice option to use. So there's some options for you of how to customize your bag, make it your own, play around with different colors, different leathers, and things like that. Now, as I said in the intro, I do not recommend at all using cork or vinyl or anything like that because it's just not going to age very well. You've got raw edges, there's no stabilizers. This bag is designed for leather, and that's where you're going to get your best results. So what tools are you going to use? So you'll need a mixture of hand tools, all really basic. You can get yourself various places, Amazon, leather supply shops. I'll include links below of all where I get my tools from. But choose what's nearest to you, what's most convenient. So first tool you're going to need is an awl. So this is just a pointy metal tool, and that's what we use to mark out the leather going around the paper pattern pieces. Now you can use a pen specifically designed for leather, so it can be wiped off. I always get very nervous using those, so I stick to an awl, and you mark it on the top of the leather being the side you can see. So you'll mark directly on that, and that'll give you the best line to cut to. Now for cutting, use a really nice sharp blade. Now you can use a blade like this, or you can use a craft knife with a replaceable blade. Either way, it's got to be really, really sharp, and that will give you a nice clean cut. For straight lines, which like the no-sew tote has got more of, as well does the no-sew crossbody, a nice roller blade straight down the line, follow a ruler, and that's going to be really handy for getting a nice straight line. I always use these for straight lines on leather. So you want to use those for that. For cutting the curves, so the rivet tabs I call them, now this is probably the trickiest part of the bag pattern of all the bags, to cut these out. Now you can use something like a coin or any button, anything round to guide you as you go around with the blade. But what I like to use for a real clean finish is these cutting dies. So these just got a blade on one side, nice clean shape, and basically you hit it down with a hammer. So you'll see me using these in the videos. They're really great to have. Now this particular set is not very expensive at all. I've got links on Etsy for this one. The problem is they seem to run out of stock really quickly. They seem to do in small batches, but it's the best option for the value of money because you get all different sizes in one set. You do get some more expensive variations, ones with a proper handle, so you can be more careful as you knock it in, because you do have to sort of hold these ones and hit them with a hammer, so you've got to be a bit careful. But for value of money, they're fantastic. They're really good. For cutting the rivet holes, and there's a couple of options. You can use something like this. Now this is what's called a Japanese hole punch. It's what me and Joe call it anyway. And essentially, you've got your cutting tool there, and as you push it in, it turns and cuts through the leather. This is great for your thinner leathers. For the thicker ones, it can do it. Just watch out for that you keep the hole clear, because if you don't, it can block cutting it cleanly and you end up with some poorly cut holes. But great for your thin leathers. But sometimes you can't beat just a proper hole punch with a mallet. Just knock it in and you get a nice clean cut. You can see exactly where you're going. Have a variety of sizes. Generally for rivets you want a 2mm hole. So this is a 2mm hole for here, and for the back that applies to all of the bags. Now if you're using copper rivets, so these are traditional copper rivets, you generally need a 3mm hole to cut these ones. And as regards these patterns, which are in the pattern as you saw, I've just used a variety of sizes from 1mm up to 3 to create a bit of a pattern. So that's something you can do. So get a few sizes would be really helpful. Now I won't go into how you actually set rivets. I think me and Joe are going to do a separate video about how to use different rivets with different tools, so keep an eye out for that one. Now for finishing the edges, I like to use one of these. Now this is but more of a specialist leather tool, and this is what's called an edge beveler. So what you do when you're working with leather, let's grab the purple one, you have a square cut where you've cut with a blade. You run this down the side of the cut and it basically puts a slight shape or a bevel to your leather. Just creates a bit more of a classy finish. Now I did do a separate video about how you can use these sorts of tools when making a strap. Same principle applies, so I'll link that in the description. So that's what you can use these for. And then you can even use sandpaper to actually round off the edges of leather. Once you've done that, you can then, if you want to, especially with a vegetable tan leather, like these ones here, you can actually treat the edges by burnishing it. Now that's where you use what's a tool called a slicker, and you basically just run it over the edge. You can use a cloth as well, and then you can use like water, or you can use something like this, which is a Tokonel burnishing gum. This is what a lot of leather crafters use, and that helps to treat the edge, finish off nicely, and actually helps to protect it as well. Now you don't have to do that, you can leave the edge completely raw, absolutely no problem, but options if you want to sort of experiment, find out new techniques when it comes to using your leather. So I hope you found some of that information useful. As I said, a lot of the tips and tricks are all actually in the pattern instructions, but that hopefully just introduces you to what these patterns are all about. Now this sort of, in my mind, completes the trilogy of patterns. I haven't really got any plans to create any more no-sew leather patterns. Of course, if you have an idea for me that you want me to pursue, stick it in the comments. I will give it a go, but I make no promises. And actually in the future, we might look at perhaps producing a pattern that actually requires sewing, sort of expanding the skills as we go along. So I hope you found this useful. I hope you give one of these bags a go. Perhaps start with the no-sew clutch, which is going to come out a few days after this video is released. All the links are in the description as usual. Any questions, stick it in the comments. Hopefully I can answer your questions. And thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you again.